What if Jon Snow was crowned king in the north before Robb Stark? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The morning mist clings to the stones of Winterfell as Jon Snow stands in the castle's courtyard, watching his uncle Benjen prepare for the journey north. The Black brothers who came south with the first ranger finish loading their supplies onto pack horses, their worn cloaks dark against the grey dawn. Jon's own belongings sit nearby in a simple leather satchel, everything he owns in the world that matters enough to take beyond the wall. Benjen approaches, his weathered face grave. "Are you ready, boy?" Jon nods, though his stomach churns with uncertainty. As ready as anyone can be for such a choice. The Night's Watch is more than a choice, Jon. It's a sacred vow. Once you speak the words, there's no turning back. Benjen's hand rests on Jon's shoulder. Your father's blood runs in your veins. But so does something else. The wall has a way of showing a man who he truly is. Before Jon can respond, the sound of ravens reaches them from the rookery. Not just one or two, but a flock returning all at once. The Black brothers exchange glances. Ravens arriving together usually mean urgent news. Maester Luwin hurries across the courtyard, his chain jangling with each quick step. His face is pale as fresh snow. "My lord," he calls to Benjen, then stops when he sees Jon. "Forgive me, but I must speak with Lady Stark immediately." "What news, Maester?" Benjen asks. Luwin hesitates, glancing between uncle and nephew. "Word from King's Landing. Lord Eddard has been—" He pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Lord Eddard has been arrested for treason." The words hit Jon like a physical blow. His father? Arrested? For treason? It makes no sense. Eddard Stark is the most honourable man in the Seven Kingdoms. Benjen's face hardens. On whose orders? Queen Cersei, acting as regent for King Joffrey. Luwin's voice drops to barely above a whisper. There are other ravens as well. From the Riverlands. Lady Catelyn calls for all loyal men to gather their strength. Jon's mind races. His father imprisoned, his stepmother calling the banners. Everything is falling apart, and he's supposed to leave for the wall today. The timing feels like a cruel jest of the gods. "Jon," Benjen's voice cuts through his thoughts. "We must leave now, before this situation grows worse. The Night's Watch takes no part in the quarrels of the realm." But Jon barely hears him. His feet are already moving toward the keep, toward whatever crisis awaits within those ancient walls. Behind him, Benjen calls his name, but Jon doesn't stop. Inside the great hall, chaos reigns. Servants rush back and forth, carrying messages, and Catelyn Stark stands at the high table, surrounded by papers and Raven's scrolls. Her red hair catches the torchlight as she reads, and Jon can see the fear in her green eyes, even from across the room. Robb enters from the other side of the hall, still pulling on his doublet. At 14, he looks older than his years, but the weight of sudden responsibility shows in every line of his young face. "Mother, what's happening?" Robb demands. Catelyn looks up, and for the first time Jon can remember, she appears truly frightened. "Your father has been charged with treason. The Queen claims he plotted to steal Joffrey's throne." Her voice breaks slightly. They have Sansa and Arya. Jon feels the world tilt beneath his feet. His little sisters, prisoners in King's Landing. His father facing a traitor's death. And here he stands, ready to abandon them all for the Black. Robb's face goes white, then red with fury. "Treason? Father would never—" He stops, composing himself with visible effort. "What do we do?" "We call the banners," Catelyn says firmly. "Every man who can hold a sword. Your father's life may depend on our strength." "How many can we raise?" Robb asks. 18, perhaps 20,000 if the smaller houses answer quickly. Catelyn's hands tremble as she sorts through the Raven's messages. "But we need time, and I fear we may not have it. Jon steps forward. What about the other kingdoms? Surely they won't stand for this injustice? Catelyn's head snaps up, and her eyes narrow when she sees him. For a moment, the old coldness returns. This is not your concern, Jon. You have your own path to follow. The words sting, but Jon doesn't retreat. My father's life is my concern. My sister's safety is my concern. You're Ned's bastard, not his heir, Catelyn says sharply. Robb will handle this. Robb looks between his mother and half-brother, conflict clear in his blue eyes. Jon could help. Jon has already made his choice, Catelyn interrupts. The Night's Watch awaits. Jon feels the familiar burn of rejection, but something else stirs within him, a sense that this moment matters more than any oath or vow. His family needs him, not the Wall. Perhaps the choice isn't as clear as it seemed, Jon says quietly. Catelyn's expression hardens. You cannot have it both ways. The Night's Watch or House Stark. But not both. Before Jon can answer, heavy footsteps echo in the hall. Benjen enters, his face grim. The horses are ready. We should leave within the hour if we're to make good time. Jon looks at his uncle, then at Robb's worried face, then at Catelyn's hostile glare. Everything hangs in the balance. His future, his family's survival, the very fate of the North. Uncle, Jon says slowly, what if I didn't come with you? Benjen's eyebrows rise. The Wall has been your dream since you were a boy. Honor, purpose, a place where bastards can rise on merit alone. Dreams change, Jon replies. My family's in danger. The Night's Watch is your family now, Benjen says firmly, or will be, once you speak the vows. Jon shakes his head. I haven't spoken them yet, and I can't abandon them now, not when they need every sword. Catelyn's face shows surprise, perhaps even a flicker of approval before the mask returns. One sword will not save your father. But 20,000 might, Jon says, and Robb shouldn't bear that burden alone. Robb steps forward, gratitude clear in his eyes. Mother, Jon knows the North as well as anyone. His counsel could be valuable. His counsel, perhaps. But what of his blade? What of his loyalty when it truly matters? Catelyn's voice softens slightly. Jon, I know you mean well, but this is not your fight. It became my fight the moment they imprisoned my father and took my sisters. Jon's voice carries new steel. I won't go to the Wall while my family suffers. Benjen moves closer, his expression troubled. Think carefully, nephew. The Night's Watch offers certainty, honor, brotherhood. If you stay here, you remain a bastard in a world that offers bastards precious little. Then I'll make my own place in that world. The hall falls silent, except for the crackling of torches. Jon can hear his heart beating, can feel the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like a mantle. Finally, Benjen sighs. I cannot force you to take the black, but if you stay, knowing the full weight of what you've chosen. There will be no place for you at the Wall after this. Jon nods. I understand. Catelyn watches this exchange with unreadable eyes. When Benjen turns to go, she speaks softly. Wait. The First Ranger pauses. If Jon stays, he stays as what? We cannot pretend he's anything more than he is. He's Ned's blood, Robb says firmly. That makes him family. Family, yes. But not heir, not a lord, not legitimate, Jon finishes for her. I know what I am, Lady Stark, but I also know what I can do. Let me prove my worth in service, not through birth. Catelyn studies him for a long moment. Something shifts in her expression, though she remains guarded. Very well, you may stay. But understand this. The North remembers everything, including where loyalties truly lie. Benjen approaches Jon one final time. "I pray you don't come to regret this choice, boy. The wall would have been simpler." "Simple isn't always right," Jon replies. With that, Benjen Stark departs Winterfell, leading his small company of black brothers back toward the distant wall. Jon watches from the courtyard until they disappear beyond the castle gates, knowing he has chosen a path with no clear destination. But as he turns back toward the Great Hall, toward the crisis that awaits, toward his family's desperate need, Jon feels something he has never experienced before. Not the cold certainty of the Night's Watch vows, but something warmer and more dangerous, the weight of choice freely made, and the first stirrings of a different kind of honor. 3 days pass before the Raven arrives that changes everything. Jon stands in the training yard, working through sword forms with Robb, when Maester Luwin appears at the edge of the practice ground. The old man's face is ashen, his usual scholarly composure shattered. In his trembling hand, he clutches a small roll of parchment, tied with black ribbon. "My lords," Luwin calls, his voice barely carrying across the yard, "I must speak with you immediately." Robb lowers his practice sword, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool morning air. "What is it, Maester?" Luwin approaches slowly, each step heavy with dread. "A raven from King's Landing." He holds out the parchment like it carries a plague. The news is grave beyond measure." Jon feels ice forming in his stomach. He and Robb exchange glances, both sensing that whatever words await will shatter their world completely. "Tell us," Robb says quietly. Luwin unrolls the parchment with shaking fingers. His voice breaks as he reads. "By order of his grace, Joffrey of the House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. Lord Eddard of House Stark has been executed for high treason against the crown." The words hang in the air like a death knell. For a moment, nobody moves. The practice yard falls completely silent, except for the distant sound of ravens cawing in the rookery. Then Robb's sword clatters to the ground. "No." The word comes out as barely a whisper. "No, that's not. Father wouldn't. They said they'd show mercy if he confessed." Jon reaches for his brother's shoulder, but Robb jerks away, his face contorting with grief and rage. "They killed him. They killed our father." "My lord, there's more," Luwin continues, his voice hollow. The Raven also bears word that Lady Sansa remains at court, under the Queen's protection. Lady Arya's whereabouts are unknown. Robb staggers backward as if struck. His breathing becomes rapid and shallow. Jon steps closer, ready to catch him if he falls. "When?" Jon asks, his own voice surprisingly steady. "When did it happen?" Luwin checks the parchment again. 5 days ago, on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor, before hundreds of witnesses. The image hits Jon like a physical blow. His father, the most honorable man in Westeros, dying as a traitor before a jeering crowd. It's impossible to accept, yet the Raven's message makes it brutally real. Robb suddenly explodes into motion, grabbing his fallen sword and hurling it across the yard with a primal scream. The blade crashes against the stone wall, ringing like a funeral bell. "I'll kill them all!" Robb shouts, tears streaming down his face. "Every last Lannister, every man who stood by and watched. I'll burn King's Landing to ash." "Robb," Jon's voice cuts through his brother's rage. "We need to think clearly." "Think?" Robb whirls on him, eyes wild. "They murdered our father. They have our sisters. What is there to think about?" Before Jon can answer, the sound of approaching horses echoes from the courtyard. Dozens of them arriving fast and hard. The northern lords have begun to gather. We should go inside, Jon says. Mother will need to know. They find Catelyn in the great hall, already surrounded by ravens and scrolls. Word travels fast in times of crisis, and messages pour in from across the north. Her face is pale as winter snow, but her hands remain steady as she sorts through the correspondence. Mother, Robb begins, but she holds up a hand for silence. I know, she says simply. The whole realm knows by now. Joffrey made sure of that. Robb's voice cracks. How do we tell Bran and Rickon? How do we explain that their father is never coming home? Catelyn closes her eyes for a moment. When she opens them again, Jon sees steel beneath the grief. We tell them their father died with honor, even if the rest of the world believes otherwise. Heavy footsteps echo in the corridor, and the great hall doors swing open. The Great Jon strides in, his massive frame filling the doorway. Lord Rickard Karstark follows close behind, along with several other northern lords who must have ridden through the night to reach Winterfell. The Great Jon's face is thunderous. Lady Stark, my lords, I came as soon as the ravens reached Last Hearth. His voice booms off the stone walls. What are your orders? Catelyn rises from her chair. My orders? Aye, the king in the south has murdered our liege lord. Every man in the north wants blood for this crime. The Great Jon's hand rests on his sword hilt. When do we march? March where? Catelyn asks. Against what enemy? King's Landing is 1,000 miles away, defended by the City Watch and whatever forces remain loyal to the Iron Throne. Lord Karstark steps forward, his weathered face grim. The distance doesn't matter. Honor demands we answer this insult. Honor won't bring my husband back, Catelyn replies sharply, or save my daughters. The Great Jon's eyes narrow. So we do nothing? Let this boy king think he can murder Starks without consequence? I didn't say we do nothing, Catelyn says. But we must be careful. One rash move and we lose everything. Robb moves to stand beside his mother. The Great Jon is right. We can't let this stand. Jon watches the exchange, noting how the lords look to Robb despite his youth. The boy who was playing with practiced swords an hour ago is now expected to lead armies and make decisions of war and peace. What forces can we raise? Robb asks. The Great Jon grins wolfishly. Give me a fortnight, and I'll have 3,000 men at your banner. The Karstarks can match that number. The Manderleys have already begun gathering their strength, Lord Karstark adds, as have the Glovers and the Reeds. Catelyn holds up a hand. And what then? We march south with 20,000 men into a kingdom that outnumbers us 4 to 1? Numbers aren't everything, the Great Jon growls. We're Northmen. We're harder than the soft Southerners. Hard men die just as easily as soft ones when they're surrounded and outnumbered, Catelyn counters. Jon steps forward. What about allies? Other kingdoms must be as disturbed by this as we are. The lords turn to look at him, and Jon feels the weight of their attention. He's still a bastard in their eyes, but his presence beside Robb grants him a voice in these discussions. The boy has a point, Lord Karstark says slowly. Robert Baratheon had brothers. Surely they won't accept Joffrey's claim without question. Stannis and Renly, Robb nods. They'll have their own supporters. Catelyn looks thoughtful. If the realm fractures into civil war, we might have more options than a simple march on King's Landing. The Great Jon slams his fist on the table. Options and politics won't restore our lord's honor. The North remembers, and we'll make them remember why they should fear us. The North remembers, Robb repeats, his voice growing stronger. But we also endure. Father would want us to be smart about this. Jon catches his brother's eye and nods approvingly. Despite his grief and rage, Robb is starting to think like a leader rather than just an angry son. More lords continue arriving throughout the day. The Umbers and Karstarks are joined by representatives of smaller houses, Hornwood, Tywin, Tallheart, and others. Each brings the same message. Their men are ready to march at House Stark's command. By evening, The great hall resembles a war council more than a family home. Maps spread across tables, and the lords debate routes, supply lines, and potential allies. The discussion grows heated as different factions emerge. Some, led by the Greatjon, favor immediate action. March south in force and take revenge for Lord Eddard's murder, regardless of the consequences. Others, including several older lords, counsel caution. Wait and see how the political situation develops before committing to any course of action. Catelyn finds herself caught between these positions, wanting justice, but fearing for her remaining children's safety. Throughout it all, Jon observes and listens. He notes which lords defer to Robb's opinion and which still see him as a boy. He watches how Catelyn manages the various personalities and interests in the room. Most importantly, he begins to understand that this crisis has fundamentally changed not just their family, but the entire structure of power in the north. As the night deepens and the debates continue, one thing becomes clear to everyone present. The old world, where Ned Stark served as Warden of the North under a Baratheon king, has ended forever. What comes next will be written in blood and steel, one way or another. Robb stands at the head table, looking older than his 14 years. Tomorrow we'll send ravens to every house in the north, every man who can hold a sword, every knight who remembers his oath to House Stark. They all need to know. The north remembers, and the north will have its justice. The lords murmur their approval, but Jon sees the weight settling on his brother's shoulders. The boy who worried about practice sword forms this morning now carries the burden of an entire kingdom's expectations. And somewhere in the distance, Jon hears the first faint rumble of war drums beginning to beat. The great hall of Winterfell has been transformed into a war chamber. Maps of the Seven Kingdoms cover every available surface, weighted down with carved wooden pieces representing armies and castles. Candles burn low in their holders, casting dancing shadows across the weathered faces of 24 northern lords. The Greatjon sits at Robb's right hand, his massive frame dwarfing the chair beneath him. Lord Rickard Karstark occupies a place of honor across the table, his grey beard neatly trimmed despite the urgency of recent days. Representatives from the major houses fill the remaining seats: Manderley, Glover, Hornwood, Serwyn, and others whose banners have answered the Stark call. At the head of the table, Robb studies a map of the Riverlands with intense concentration. Dark circles under his eyes reveal sleepless nights spent wrestling with decisions no 14-year-old should face. Beside him stands Maester Luwin, ready with counsel and correspondence. Jon positions himself along the wall, close enough to hear every word, but removed from the table where only true lords belong. His bastard status grants him the right to observe, not to participate. Yet, the question remains, Lord Karstark says, his voice carrying the authority of experience. Do we march on King's Landing directly, or do we seek allies first? The Greatjon slams his fist on the table, making the wooden army pieces jump. Allies? What allies do we need? 20,000 Northmen are worth 40,000 soft Southerners. 20,000 men marching into a kingdom of millions, counters Maester Qyburn's replacement, a nervous young man representing House Hornwood. The odds are not favourable. Numbers mean nothing when you're fighting for honour, growls the Greatjon. Our fathers conquered this realm once. We can do it again. Catelyn speaks from her position near the hearth. Our fathers conquered alongside Aegon's dragons. We have no such advantage. Lord Glover, a lean man with intelligent eyes, leans forward. What of the other claimants? Surely Stannis Baratheon won't accept his nephew's usurpation quietly. Stannis is Robert's heir by law, Robb agrees. If we support his claim, Stannis has no love for the North, interrupts the Greatjon. He'd use our swords to win his crown, then cast us aside when convenient. Better than facing the combined might of the South alone, Lord Karstark observes. The debate continues in circles, each lord voicing the same arguments with slight variations. Jon watches and listens, noting the patterns in their thinking. These are good men, loyal and brave, but their strategies rely too heavily on northern valor and not enough on southern weaknesses. "My lords," Robb finally says, raising his hand for silence. "We're discussing two separate goals, justice for my father's murder and protection for the North. Perhaps we need different approaches for each." "Explain," Lord Glover says. Robb straightens, and Jon sees his brother working to project authority beyond his years. "If we march south in force, we abandon the North to raiders and opportunists. But if we stay home, we look weak." "The boy has a point," murmurs Lord Karstark. "The Ironborn have been quiet lately, but that won't last if they sense weakness." Jon steps forward slightly, drawn by an idea forming in his mind. The lords turn to look at him, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disapproval. "My lords," Jon begins, his voice steady despite the attention. "What if we didn't have to choose?" The Great Jon's eyebrows rise. "Speak plain, boy." Jon moves closer to the map, pointing to specific locations. "The Riverlands are in chaos. Tywin Lannister marches east, while his son Jaime holds King's Landing. They can't be in two places at once." "What are you suggesting?" Catelyn asks, her tone neutral but watchful. "Split our forces," Jon says, warming to the strategy. "Send half south to aid the Riverlands and threaten the Lannister rear. Keep half north to guard against the Ironborn and maintain a reserve." The room falls silent as the lords consider this. Lord Glover strokes his beard thoughtfully. "Interesting. But who commands which force?" That's the question Jon had hoped to avoid, but there's no escaping it now. The issue of leadership strikes at the heart of northern politics. The Great Jon speaks first. "Young Robb should lead the southern force. He's Lord of Winterfell now, the rightful commander." "Robb is needed here," counters Lord Karstark. "If the Ironborn attack or if political situations change rapidly, Winterfell must have its lord." "Then who commands in the south?" asks Lord Hornwood. "We need someone the men will follow. Someone with the authority to make quick decisions." The lords look around the table uncertainly. Most are needed with their own forces, and those with sufficient experience lack the political weight to command other houses. "What about Jon?" Robb says suddenly. The suggestion hits the room like a thunderclap. Several lords shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Great Jon's face darkens. "A bastard?" Lord Hornwood says, his voice careful but skeptical. "Leading northern armies into battle?" "A bastard with good counsel, it seems," Lord Glover observes. "This strategy shows promise." Jon feels the room's attention focus on him like a burning lens. His heart pounds, but he forces his expression to remain calm. The Great Jon stands, his chair scraping against stone. "I'll not follow Ned Stark's bastard into battle, no matter how clever his words." "You'd follow his son, though," Jon says quietly. "And I am Ned Stark's blood, whatever my birth circumstances." "Blood isn't the same as legitimacy," the Great Jon replies. "Men need to know their commander has the right to lead them. Men need to know their commander will lead them to victory," Jon counters. "Birth gives you the right to try. Success gives you the right to continue." Lord Karstark chuckles. "Well said. But the Great Jon raises valid concerns. How do we convince 10,000 men to follow a bastard?" Before Jon can answer, Robb stands. "They follow him because I order them to. I am Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. My commands carry the authority of House Stark." The room grows tense as the lords weigh their loyalties. Refusing Robb's direct order would border on rebellion, but following a bastard into battle challenges every tradition they know. Catelyn speaks into the silence. There is another consideration. If this southern force fails, the North needs to maintain plausible distance from the defeat. A bastard's failure reflects less on House Stark than a true son's would. Jon feels the sting of her words, but recognizes the political calculation behind them. She's not supporting him. She's protecting the family's reputation. Clever, Lord Glover admits. If the strategy succeeds, House Stark gets the credit. If it fails, the bastard takes the blame. I'll not be party to using one of Ned's children as a scapegoat, the Great Jon growls. It's not using him if he volunteers, Robb says, looking at Jon directly. Well, brother, will you accept this command? The word brother carries weight in front of the assembled lords. Robb is publicly acknowledging their relationship, despite Jon's bastard status. Jon meets his brother's gaze. If the lords will have me, I'll serve as best I can. The question is strategy, not bloodlines, Lord Karstark says pragmatically. Will this plan work? Jon returns to the map, his confidence growing as he explains the details. The Riverlands are House Tully's domain. Catelyn's family has good reason to hate the Lannisters after what happened to father. If we support them against Tywin's forces, we gain allies and divide Lannister attention. And if the Ironborn attack while our forces are split, asks Lord Hornwood. They attack a prepared defense instead of an empty coast, Jon replies. 10,000 men in strong positions can hold off 20,000 raiders. The Great Jon studies the map carefully. The boy knows war, I'll give him that. But knowledge isn't the same as experience. Experience has to start somewhere, Robb says firmly. I trust Jon's judgment. The debate continues for another hour, but Jon senses the room's mood shifting in his favor. The strategy is sound, and the lords can see the advantages despite their reservations about his birth. Finally, Lord Karstark calls for a decision. All in favor of the split strategy? Hands rise around the table, not all at once, but steadily. Lord Glover votes first, followed by the smaller houses. Even some of the Great Jon's allies nod their approval. The Great Jon himself hesitates longest, his fierce gaze locked on Jon's face. If I vote for this, he says slowly, I'm voting to follow you into battle. Don't make me regret it. I'll earn your trust, my lord, Jon replies. See that you do. The Great Jon's hand rises, completing the consensus. As the lords begin discussing details and logistics, Catelyn approaches Jon near the wall where he's studying supply calculations. A word, she says quietly. They step into a small alcove away from the main discussion. For a moment, Catelyn says nothing, simply studying Jon's face, as if seeing him for the first time. You realize what you've done, she finally says. I've accepted a command to serve House Stark and the North. You've stepped into a role that could destroy you if you fail. Her voice carries no warmth, but also no hostility. The lords will watch your every move, waiting for you to prove their doubts correct. I understand the risks. Catelyn nods slowly. I believe you do, which is why I'm going to give you some advice. She steps closer, lowering her voice further. Don't try to be Ned. Don't try to be Robb. Be yourself, and let your actions speak louder than your birth. Jon feels a shock of surprise. This is the closest Catelyn has ever come to acknowledging him as anything more than an inconvenient reminder of her husband's supposed infidelity. Why are you helping me? He asks. Because despite everything, you are Robb's brother. And if you fail, he suffers. Her expression softens slightly. But also because your strategy shows promise. The North needs leaders who can think beyond tradition and honor. Perhaps bastards see possibilities that legitimate sons cannot. With that, she returns to the main discussion, leaving Jon alone with his thoughts and the weight of new expectations. As the War Council concludes, and the lords begin departing for their own preparations, Jon realizes that everything has changed again. 3 days ago, he was bound for the Night's Watch. Yesterday, He was a bastard observer in family councils. Tonight, he commands an army. The Game of Thrones has begun in earnest, and Jon Snow has just played his first piece. The fever comes without warning. One moment, Robb stands in the castle's armory, inspecting weapons and discussing final preparations with his captains. The next, he staggers against a weapon rack, sweat beading on his suddenly pale forehead. "My lord?" Theon Greyjoy reaches for Robb's arm as the young lord wavers on his feet. "I'm fine," Robb mutters, but his voice lacks conviction. He tries to straighten, then doubles over as a violent shiver runs through his body. Jon appears at his brother's other side instantly. "Get Maester Luwin. Now." Within minutes, Luwin arrives with his leather bag of medicines and instruments. One touch to Robb's burning forehead tells him everything he needs to know. "Help me get him to his chambers," the Maester orders. They half-carry Robb through Winterfell's corridors as servants scatter out of their path. Word spreads quickly through the castle. The young Lord of Winterfell has taken ill on the very day the army was to march south. In Robb's chamber, Luwin works with quiet efficiency. He checks his lord's pulse, peers into his eyes, and feels the swollen glands along his neck. "How bad is it?" Jon asks from beside the bed. Luwin's expression is grim. "A severe fever, possibly lung fever. I've seen it kill strong men in days." The words hit Jon like a physical blow. Outside these chambers, 20,000 northern soldiers wait for orders. The riverlands burn while Tywin Lannister ravages the countryside. And now their leader lies unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. "What can you do?" Jon presses. "Keep the fever down. Try to strengthen his body's fight against the sickness." Luwin prepares a mixture of herbs and medicines. But ultimately, it's in the hands of the gods. Jon stares at his brother's flushed face. Just hours ago, they were discussing battle plans and troop movements. Now Robb might not live to see another dawn. Heavy footsteps echo in the corridor, followed by urgent voices. The door bursts open as the great Jon strides in, still wearing his mail from the morning's preparations. "Is it true?" the massive lord demands. "The boy's taken sick? Lord Robb has a fever," Luwin confirms. "I'm doing everything possible." The great Jon's face darkens as he takes in the scene. "How long before he's fit to ride?" "He's not riding anywhere," Luwin says firmly. "Moving him in this condition could kill him." "Then what of the army? 20,000 men stand ready to march, and you're telling me they have no lord to follow?" The question hangs in the air like a death sentence. Jon feels the weight of it pressing down on his shoulders. More lords arrive as word spreads through the castle. Lord Karstark appears first, followed by representatives from the other major houses. The chamber grows crowded with worried faces and hushed conversations. "We need decisions," Lord Glover says quietly. "The men are growing restless, and every day we delay gives the Lannisters more time to consolidate their position." "Perhaps we should postpone the march," suggests Lord Hornwood. "Wait until Lord Robb recovers." "And if he doesn't recover?" the great Jon asks bluntly. "What if this fever takes him like it took King Robert? Do we simply abandon our plans and let the Lannisters win by default?" An uncomfortable silence falls over the room. Everyone knows the statistics. Fever kills as many men as swords do, particularly young ones whose bodies haven't built up resistance. Lord Karstark speaks carefully. "If the worst happens, there's always Bran. He's Lord Eddard's heir after Robb." "Bran's a crippled boy of 7, the great Jon growls. "We can't expect him to lead armies into battle." "Then what do you suggest?" Lord Glover asks. The great Jon's gaze falls on Jon, who stands quietly beside Robb's bed. For a long moment, the massive lord considers something that clearly troubles him. "The bastard," he says finally. Every head in the room turns toward Jon. Several lords gasp at the audacity of the suggestion. "What?" Lord Hornwood sputters. "You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious." The great Jon's voice carries absolute conviction. Jon Snow knows war better than any man half his age has a right to. He's proven his strategic mind in council, and the men respect him. He's a bastard, Lord Karstark states flatly. Aye, he's a bastard, but he's also Ned Stark's blood. And that matters more than legitimacy when lives hang in the balance. Jon steps forward, his heart pounding. My lords, I appreciate the Great Jon's confidence, but what? The Great Jon interrupts. You think you're not ready? Boy, none of us were ready for the responsibilities we carry. Readiness is a luxury we don't have. Lord Glover strokes his beard thoughtfully. The precedent would be unusual. A bastard commanding legitimate lords? Unusual times call for unusual solutions, the Great Jon replies. Would you rather follow a bastard who knows what he's doing, or march south with no leadership at all? From the bed, Robb stirs slightly, mumbling incoherently in his fever. The sight of his brother's suffering strengthens Jon's resolve. If the lords will have me, Jon says slowly, I'll do whatever is necessary to serve the North. The question isn't willingness, Lord Karstark says. It's authority. By what right does a bastard command armies? By right of necessity, the Great Jon declares. When the castle burns, you don't ask the water-bearer's pedigree before letting him fight the fire. Lord Hornwood shakes his head. This sets a dangerous precedent. If we legitimize bastard leadership now, what happens to proper succession later? We worry about proper succession when we survive the current crisis, Jon says firmly. Right now, the North needs leadership, not political theory. The debate continues for another hour as more lords arrive and add their voices to the discussion. Some support the Great Jon's radical suggestion, particularly the younger lords who've seen Jon's capabilities firsthand. Others resist, clinging to traditional notions of legitimacy and bloodline authority. Throughout it all, Jon remains beside Robb's bed, watching his brother fight for life, while the lords fight over who should replace him. The responsibility weighs heavily on his mind, not just commanding an army, but essentially usurping his brother's position during Robb's greatest vulnerability. As the sun sets outside the chamber windows, Maester Luwin calls for quiet. My lords, Lord Robb's condition is worsening. The fever has strengthened, and his breathing grows more labored. I fear we may have days, not weeks, to make these decisions. The sobering news forces a moment of clarity among the assembled lords. Political considerations suddenly seem less important when faced with Robb's potential death. Lord Karstark breaks the silence. If Jon leads, who serves as his advisors? A bastard may command, but he'll need experienced counsel. All of us, the Great Jon says simply. That's what advisors are for. And if Robb recovers? Asks Lord Glover. Then command returns to him. Jon answers without hesitation. I have no desire to usurp my brother's rightful place. The lords exchange glances, weighing Jon's words against their knowledge of his character. His ready acknowledgement of temporary authority helps ease some concerns about ambition. Finally, Lord Karstark nods slowly. Very well. If the majority agrees, Jon Snow may command until Lord Robb recovers, or until other arrangements become necessary. One by one, the lords voice their agreement. Some with enthusiasm, others with clear reluctance, but all recognizing the practical necessity of the moment. The Great Jon clasps Jon's shoulder with a massive hand. Congratulations, lad. You're now responsible for 20,000 lives and the honor of the North. Jon looks down at Robb's fevered face, then back at the assembled lords. I won't let you down. See that you don't, Lord Karstark says. The North remembers both success and failure. As the lords file out to inform their men of the leadership change, Jon remains beside his brother's bed. Maester Luwin continues his ministrations, but the fever shows no signs of breaking. Will he live? Jon asks quietly. Luwin's pause before answering tells Jon everything he needs to know. The next few days will be critical, but Robb is young and strong. If anyone can fight this off, he can. Jon nods, though privately he wonders if he'll ever see his brother conscious again. Command has fallen to him sooner and more completely than anyone imagined possible. Outside the chamber, he can hear the sounds of an army preparing for war under new leadership. In the morning, 20,000 northern soldiers will march south following a bastard's banner. The thought both terrifies and exhilarates him. Standing beside Robb's bed, Jon Snow realizes that his childhood has ended forever. Whether he succeeds or fails, lives or dies, he can never again be just Ned Stark's bastard son. Tomorrow, he becomes something entirely new, a leader whose worth will be measured not in bloodlines, but in victories. The Game of Thrones has claimed another piece, and Jon must now prove he belongs on the board. 10 days of hard marching bring the northern host to the borders of the Riverlands. Jon rides at the head of the column, 20,000 men following in his wake. The Great Jon commands the vanguard, while Lord Karstark leads the rear guard. Between them stretch endless lines of infantry, cavalry, and supply wagons that snake across the countryside like a great grey serpent. Ghost lopes alongside Jon's horse, the white direwolf's presence drawing stares and whispers from the common soldiers. Some make the sign of the old gods when they see the beast. Others nod approvingly, recognizing the wolf as a symbol of House Stark's power. The Golden Tooth lies just ahead, Lord Glover reports, riding up from a scouting party. Our outriders confirm Lannister banners on the walls. Jon studies the landscape before them. The Golden Tooth controls the main pass between the Westerlands and the Riverlands, its castle perched on a rocky prominence that commands the entire valley. Anyone wanting to move armies between the two regions must either take this fortress or find a much longer route around it. How many men? Jon asks. Perhaps 1,000, maybe 1,500. The castle looks well provisioned, but not heavily manned. Jon nods, his mind already working through the tactical possibilities. The Golden Tooth is strong, but its strength lies in passive defense. If he can draw the garrison out or find an alternate approach, the northern numbers should prevail. Send word to halt the column, Jon orders. I want the captains assembled for a war council. Within the hour, the senior commanders gather around a rough map sketched in the dirt. The Great Jon squats beside Jon, his massive frame casting a shadow over the crude drawings. Direct assault, the Great Jon suggests. We have the numbers to overwhelm them. At the cost of how many lives? Jon asks. Castle walls are built to multiply defenders' effectiveness. 1,000 men behind stone can hold off 5,000 attackers if they're determined enough. Lord Karstark points to the map. What about siege? Starve them out? That could take months. We need to reach the Riverlands quickly, before Tywin can consolidate his position. Jon traces alternate routes with a stick. But there might be another way. He points to the terrain features around the castle. The Golden Tooth sits on high ground, but it's not the only high ground in the area. These ridges to the north and east offer possibilities. Possibilities for what? Lord Glover asks. Jon's eyes gleam with an idea forming. For making them come to us instead of us going to them. The plan Jon outlines is audacious in its simplicity. Instead of attacking the castle directly, the Northern Army will position itself to threaten the Lannister supply lines and escape routes, force the garrison to either sally forth and fight or watch helplessly as Northern forces bypass their stronghold entirely. It could work, the Great Jon admits grudgingly, but what if they just stay behind their walls and let us pass? Then we've neutralized 1,000 Lannister soldiers without losing a single man, Jon replies. Either way, we win. The maneuver begins before dawn. Northern infantry move into position along the ridges overlooking the main road, while cavalry units circle wide to cut off potential retreat routes. Jon positions himself with the central reserve, ready to respond to whatever the Lannisters decide to do. As the sun rises, the garrison commander at the Golden Tooth faces an impossible choice. Let the massive Northern army pass unchallenged, or sortie forth to engage an enemy that outnumbers him 20-1. Pride makes the decision for him. The castle gates swing open as 800 Lannister soldiers march out in formation. Their crimson banners snap in the morning breeze, and their armor gleams despite the early hour. These are professional soldiers, well-trained and disciplined, but they're also walking into a carefully prepared trap. Jon watches from his command position as the Lannister force advances toward what they believe to be the Northern Army's main body. In reality, they're approaching a deliberately weakened center, while the bulk of Jon's forces wait hidden on the surrounding heights. "Now," Jon says quietly. Horn calls echo across the valley as thousands of Northern soldiers emerge from concealment. The Lannister formation suddenly finds itself surrounded on 3 sides, with more enemies appearing with each passing moment. To their credit, the Lannister commander doesn't panic. He immediately begins maneuvering his men into a defensive square, shields facing outward against the converging threat. But the Northern Army has momentum, and Jon has planned for exactly this response. "Cavalry now!" the great Jon roars. 400 mounted knights charge down from the eastern ridge, hitting the Lannister square like a hammer blow. Lances punch through shields and mail, while horses trample men who fall beneath the hooves. The square wavers but doesn't break. These are veteran soldiers who know their business. Jon draws his sword and spurs his horse forward. Around him, his personal guard follows, but it's Ghost who reaches the enemy first. The white direwolf explodes into the Lannister ranks like a force of nature. Men scream as massive jaws tear through leather and flesh. Panic spreads faster than fire as soldiers who've never seen a direwolf in battle discover why the Starks inspire such fear. Jon follows in Ghost's wake, his blade cutting down anyone who stands in his path. The sword work Uncle Benjen taught him serves him well now, each stroke calculated and precise. A Lannister knight on horseback charges toward him, lance aimed at Jon's chest. Jon ducks under the point and brings his sword up in a rising cut that takes the man from hip to shoulder. The knight tumbles from his saddle, blood pooling in the dirt. Around him, the battle rages with increasing intensity. Northern soldiers pour down from the ridges, while the surviving Lannisters fight with desperate courage. Steel rings against steel as men die for gold and honor. The Great Jon appears through the press of bodies, his massive sword cleaving through enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. "The bastard knows war!" he bellows to anyone within hearing. "Look how the wolf fights!" Jon hears the words but doesn't let them distract him. A Lannister sergeant lunges at him with a spear, and Jon sidesteps before driving his pommel into the man's temple. The sergeant drops like a stone. The battle's climax comes when the Lannister commander, a grizzled knight with grey hair, challenges Jon to single combat. The surviving enemy soldiers form a rough circle around their leader, making their last stand around the man who led them from the castle walls. Jon accepts the challenge because he has no choice. Refusing would damage his reputation among both his own men and the enemy soldiers watching. The knight is skilled, his sword work polished by decades of training and experience. But Jon is younger, faster, and fighting for more than just survival. Every stroke carries the weight of his father's murder and his sister's captivity. The duel ends when Jon's blade finds the gap between the knight's helmet and gorget. The man topples backward, his blood darkening the earth. With their commander dead, the remaining Lannisters throw down their weapons. Less than 200 survive from the original 800. Ghost pats over to Jon's side, the direwolf's white fur stained with enemy blood. The sight sends a chill through friend and foe alike, the wolf of Winterfell standing beside his master on a field of victory. "Mercy, my lord," one of the surviving Lannister soldiers calls out. "We yield to your banner." Jon looks at the defeated men, then at his own soldiers watching for his response. This moment will define how he treats enemies, setting a precedent for all future battles. "You fought with honor," Jon declares loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Those who swear to harm no more Northern soldiers may depart with their lives. Those who refuse may join your commander." Most of the survivors eagerly swear the required oath. A few, too proud or too loyal to abandon their cause, choose death instead, Jon grants them the quick end they request, winning respect from both sides for his mercy and resolve. As the Northern army secures the battlefield and tends to their wounded, word of the victory spreads through the ranks. The bastard boy, who some had doubted, has proven himself in the crucible of battle. "Magnificent work," Lord Karstark says, approaching Jon as the sun sets over the carnage. "Your father would be proud." "My father would grieve for the unnecessary deaths," Jon replies, cleaning his sword. "But he would understand the necessity." The Great Jon appears with a casualty count. 37 dead, maybe 60 wounded, seriously enough to slow our march. Against 800 Lannister soldiers. That's better than we had any right to expect. Jon nods, though the numbers feel abstract compared to the faces of the men he watched die. Command means making decisions that cost lives, even when those decisions are correct. That night, around the campfires, the soldiers tell and retell the story of the battle. With each telling, the details grow more dramatic. Jon's tactical brilliance becomes legendary. Ghost's ferocity takes on mythical proportions, and the Northern victory seems even more complete. "They're calling you the Wolf King," Theon reports, having finally caught up with the army after carrying messages from Winterfell. "The men say you fight like your father, but think like a Southron battle commander." Jon receives the praise with mixed feelings. Recognition from the soldiers feels good, but he knows this is only the beginning. Greater challenges await in the Riverlands, where Tywin Lannister commands forces that dwarf anything they've faced so far. "What news from home?" Jon asks. Theon's expression grows somber. "Lord Robb still fights the fever. Maester Luwin says the crisis will come soon. He'll either recover or—" He doesn't finish the sentence. Jon stares into the campfire, weighing the implications. If Robb dies, his temporary command becomes permanent. If Robb lives, questions will arise about whether Jon should step aside after proving his competence in battle. Either way, the bastard boy who left Winterfell weeks ago no longer exists. In his place stands something new, a leader forged in fire and blood, with a reputation that will spread throughout the Seven Kingdoms. The Wolf King, they call him now, and perhaps, Jon thinks, as Ghost settles beside him under the stars. They're not wrong. The ravens arrive at dawn, black wings cutting through the morning mist like harbingers of war. Jon stands in the temporary command tent as Maester Coleman, traveling with the army, breaks the wax seals on multiple scrolls. The old master's face grows more troubled with each message he reads. "What news?" Jon asks. "The realm fractures, my lord." Coleman spreads the parchments across the camp table. "Stannis Baratheon has declared himself the rightful king, claiming Joffrey is a bastard born of incest. Lord Renly has also taken the crown, gathering support in the Reach and Stormlands." Jon studies the messages, his mind racing through the implications. "And Balon Greyjoy?" "Declares himself king of the Iron Islands and the North," Coleman confirms grimly. "His longships are already raiding the western coast." The tent flap opens as the Great Jon enters, followed by Lord Karstark and several other commanders. Word of the Raven's arrival has spread quickly through the camp. 5 kings, the Great Jon says, having overheard the Maester's report. "The realm hasn't seen such chaos since the Dance of Dragons." "What of Winterfell?" Jon asks urgently. "Any word on my brother's condition?" Coleman nods and produces another scroll. "Lord Robb's fever has broken. Maester Luwin reports he's recovering, though still weak from the ordeal." Relief floods through Jon, followed immediately by a more complex emotion. If Robb lives, questions about command authority become unavoidable. "That's welcome news," Lord Karstark says carefully, though it raises certain considerations about our current situation. Jon catches the diplomatic phrasing. With Robb recovering, the lords must decide whether to return command to the rightful heir or continue following the bastard who's proven his competence. "My brother's recovery doesn't change our immediate mission," Jon says firmly. "We still need to support the Riverlands against Tywin Lannister." "True," the Great Jon agrees, "but it does affect our longer-term plans. With 5 kings claiming the throne, where does the North's loyalty lie? The question hangs in the air like smoke from the morning fires. Jon knows this moment was inevitable. The successful battle at the Golden Tooth has given him credibility, but it's also raised expectations about his role going forward. We support whoever can give us justice for Lord Eddard's murder, Lord Karstark declares. And which king offers that? Asks Lord Glover, who arrived with reinforcements 2 days earlier. Stannis, Renly. Neither has shown particular love for the North. The Great Jon's eyes narrow thoughtfully. Perhaps the North should consider a different path entirely. His words carry weight that goes beyond their surface meaning. Jon recognizes the beginning of a dangerous conversation, one that could reshape the political landscape of Westeros. We should discuss this privately, Jon says, sensing the need to control whatever follows. Lord Commanders, join me in an hour for a full council of war. The lords file out, but Jon notices meaningful glances exchanged between the Great Jon and several others. Political currents are shifting beneath the surface, and Jon fears where they might lead. An hour later, the senior commanders gather in the command tent. Jon has arranged the seating to include all major houses while maintaining some semblance of formal protocol. The situation is clear. The Great Jon begins without preamble. 5 kings fight for a throne that belongs to none of them by right or merit. Meanwhile, the North suffers under their ambitions. What do you propose? Lord Hornwood asks. The Great Jon's gaze sweeps the assembled lords. I propose we stop following Southron kings entirely. The North is vast, rich, and strong enough to stand alone. We need no crown from King's Landing. Several lords murmur agreement, but Jon feels ice forming in his stomach. This conversation is moving toward territory he's not prepared to navigate. Independence? Lord Karstark says thoughtfully. It's been 3 centuries since a king in the North ruled from Winterfell. Aye, and look what submission to southern kings has brought us, the Great Jon replies. Lord Eddard dead, his daughters prisoners, his son nearly killed by fever while serving their wars. If the North were to declare independence, Lord Glover says slowly, who would wear the crown? The question strikes the heart of the matter. Jon sees where this is heading and desperately wants to stop it, but the political momentum has its own logic. Lord Robb is the rightful heir, Jon says quickly. Lord Robb is a boy who nearly died of fever, the Great Jon counters. Meanwhile, his bastard brother has proven himself in battle and shown the wisdom to lead armies successfully. You're suggesting Jon should be king? Lord Hornwood asks, his voice carefully neutral. I'm suggesting the North needs strong leadership, and strength isn't always determined by birth order, the Great Jon declares. Jon Snow has earned the right to be considered. Jon stands abruptly. This conversation ends here. I won't be party to usurping my brother's inheritance. Usurping? The Great Jon's voice rises. You've commanded this army better than any lord twice your age. You've won battles and earned the men's loyalty. That's not usurpation. It's proven capability. It's treason against House Stark, Jon replies angrily. No, Lord Karstark says quietly. It's recognition that House Stark's survival might require difficult choices. The debate continues for another hour, growing more heated as positions harden. Roughly half the lords support exploring independence under Jon's leadership, while the others remain loyal to Robb's claim, despite acknowledging Jon's proven abilities. Jon finally storms out of the tent when the Great Jon suggests they could legitimize him by royal decree once he's crowned. The entire concept feels like betrayal, regardless of the political logic behind it. That evening, as Jon walks the camp perimeter trying to clear his head, Theon approaches with another raven. From Winterfell, Theon says, offering the scroll. Lord Robb requests immediate correspondence. Jon breaks the seal and reads his brother's message by torchlight. The contents are brief but troubling. Robb has heard rumors about discussions of northern independence and wants clarification about Jon's role in such talks. Prepare my horse, Jon orders. I'm returning to Winterfell. My lord? Theon looks confused. We're 3 days' hard ride from home. Then we'd better leave now. The journey to Winterfell passes in a blur of muddy roads and sleepless nights. Jon pushes the pace mercilessly, driven by the need to confront this situation before it spirals beyond control. He arrives to find Robb in the Great Hall, looking pale but determined. The fever has clearly weakened him, but his eyes carry the same steel that marked their father. "Brother," Robb says as Jon enters, "we need to talk." They dismiss the servants and guards, leaving only the two brothers alone in the hall where they'd played as children. The silence stretches uncomfortably before Robb speaks. "Tell me about these rumors," Robb says. "Are my lords truly discussing crowning you king?" Jon meets his brother's gaze directly. "Some are. I've told them it's not my place. But you haven't forbidden it completely." The observation cuts deep because it's true. Jon has resisted the kingship talk, but hasn't shut it down with absolute finality. "The lords need to see strength," Jon explains. "If I appear weak or indecisive, they lose confidence in northern leadership entirely. So you've played along with treason to maintain their respect?" "I've tried to balance loyalty to you with responsibility to the army you entrusted to me," Jon replies, his own anger rising. "While you were unconscious with fever, I was making decisions that kept 20,000 men unified and effective." Robb's face hardens. "Those decisions apparently included entertaining offers of my crown. I never accepted anything. I've served faithfully in your name and won battles that enhanced House Stark's reputation throughout the realm. But you've also allowed discussions that undermine my authority as Lord of Winterfell." Jon stares at his brother, seeing not the boy he'd grown up with, but a lord whose position feels threatened by a bastard success. "Do you want me to return command to you?" Jon asks bluntly. "Because if you doubt my loyalty, perhaps you should lead the army yourself." Robb hesitates, and in that pause, both brothers recognize the truth. Jon has proven himself capable of command in ways Robb hasn't yet been tested. The fever that nearly killed him has also highlighted his vulnerability in a way that makes some lords question his fitness for leadership during wartime. "I don't doubt your loyalty," Robb says finally. "I doubt your ambition. Power has a way of changing men, even good men. Then trust me to remain the brother you've always known." Robb studies Jon's face for a long moment. "The lords who want to crown you, do you think they're wrong about your capabilities?" It's the most dangerous question Robb could ask, because it forces Jon to choose between false modesty and honest self-assessment. "I think I've proven I can lead men in battle and make sound strategic decisions," Jon answers carefully. "But that doesn't make me a king." "What makes a king, then?" Jon considers the question seriously. The consent of those he governs, the wisdom to know when to fight and when to yield, the strength to make hard choices and live with their consequences. "And you don't possess those qualities?" "I possess some of them. But you're the rightful heir to House Stark, not me." Robb nods slowly. "Yet if the lords truly believe the North needs independence, and if they truly believe you're the best choice to lead that independence..." He doesn't finish the thought, but Jon hears the implications. Robb is acknowledging the political reality that his bastard brother might indeed be better suited for the challenges ahead. "What are you saying?" Jon asks. "I'm saying we both need to think carefully about what's best for the North, not just what's best for House Stark." Robb moves to the great hearth, staring into the flames. "If you do become king, I'll serve you as faithfully as you've served me." The offer hangs between them, like a bridge across an impassable chasm. Jon realizes that his brother isn't just acknowledging his capabilities. He's giving him permission to pursue the crown if circumstances demand it. "I pray it never comes to that choice," Jon says quietly. "So do I," Robb replies. "But if it does, Know that you have my blessing to put the North's needs above family politics." As Jon prepares to return to the army, he carries with him a new understanding of his position. The crown is there if he wants it, supported by proven lords, and blessed by his brother's reluctant acceptance. The question is no longer whether he could be king. The question is whether he should be. The Great Hall of River Run has witnessed many momentous occasions, but none quite like this. 24 banners hang from the stone walls, the dire wolf of Stark, the giant of Umber, the sunburst of Karstark, and others that have followed northern armies south into the riverlands. Torches cast dancing shadows across the weathered faces of lords who've marched hundreds of miles to reach this moment. Jon stands at the edge of the assembly, watching as the lords take their places around the great hearth. 3 weeks have passed since his conversation with Robb at Winterfell, 3 weeks of successful battles and growing political pressure. The question of kingship has moved from whispered speculation to open discussion. Robb enters the hall slowly, still showing the effects of his recent illness. He's regained much of his strength, but the fever left its mark in the form of occasional weakness and the sobering knowledge that death had nearly claimed him at 14. "My lords," Robb calls, his voice carrying clearly in the stone chamber. "We gather tonight to discuss the future of the North." The assembled lords fall silent. Everyone knows why they're here, but hearing it spoken aloud makes the moment feel more real. Lord Edmure Tully, their host at River Run, speaks first. "The Riverlands have seen the quality of northern leadership firsthand. Your victories against Lannister forces have been impressive." "Those victories belong to Jon," Robb says simply. "I was unconscious with fever while he led our armies to glory." The acknowledgement sends murmurs through the assembly. For Robb to publicly credit his bastard brother's achievements shows remarkable grace, but it also highlights the political reality that has brought them to this moment. The great Jon rises from his seat, his massive frame commanding attention. "Lords of the North, we face a choice that will echo through history. 5 kings claim the Iron Throne, yet none offers justice for Lord Eddard's murder or protection for northern interests. What do you propose?" Lord Karstark asks, though everyone already knows the answer. "I propose we stop serving southern kings entirely," the great Jon declares. "The North is ancient, proud and strong. We need no crown from King's Landing." Lord Glover nods agreement. Independence has merit. But the question remains, who would rule the North as king? The room grows tense as the conversation reaches its crucial point. Jon feels every eye upon him, though he hasn't moved from his position near the wall. "Lord Robb is the rightful heir to Winterfell," Lord Hornwood says carefully. "Aye, he is," the great Jon agrees. "And Lord Robb is a good man who will make a fine lord when he's older and more experienced. But these are dark times that require proven leadership." Robb steps forward before anyone can respond. "The great Jon speaks true. I nearly died of fever while my brother won battles that saved our cause. The North needs a king who can lead armies and inspire loyalty through deed, not just birth." The words hit the assembly like a thunderclap. For Robb to publicly acknowledge Jon's superior qualifications shows tremendous maturity and political wisdom. "You're suggesting your bastard brother should wear the crown?" Lord Manderley's representative asks. "I'm suggesting the North deserves the best king we can provide," Robb replies firmly. "Jon has proven himself in battle and council. He's earned the right to be considered." The great Jon seizes the moment. "Hear me, lords of the North. For 8,000 years our land has known independence. The Starks ruled from Winterfell when the southern kingdoms were nothing but warring tribes. We bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror because his dragons left us no choice. Those dragons are gone now." His voice rises with passion. "What dragons does Joffrey command? What great host does Stannis bring to force our submission? We have 20,000 swords and the strongest castles in Westeros. The North can stand alone. But under whose rule? presses Lord Karstark. The Great Jon's gaze fixes on Jon. Under the rule of the man who led us to victory at the Golden Tooth, under the rule of Ned Stark's son, bastard-born but true of heart, under the rule of the White Wolf. The nickname sends a stir through the assembly. Jon's reputation has grown with each victory, and the sight of Ghost fighting beside him has become legendary among the common soldiers. Jon Snow has no claim by law, Lord Hornwood objects. Law? The Great Jon laughs bitterly. What law protected Lord Eddard when Joffrey took his head? What law governs when 5 kings tear the realm apart? We make our own law now, and our law says the crown belongs to whoever can hold it. Lord Glover stands. The Great Jon speaks sense. I've served House Stark for 40 years, and I've never seen leadership like Jon showed in our recent campaigns. The men would follow him into the 7 hells. This is madness, murmurs Lord Serwyn. A bastard king? What precedent does this set? The precedent, Robb says quietly, is that the North values merit over birth when survival is at stake. Jon finally speaks from his position by the wall. My lords, I'm honored by your confidence, but I cannot accept what you offer. The room erupts in surprised voices. The Great Jon's face darkens with anger. Cannot accept, the massive lord roars. The North offers you a crown and you refuse? I refuse to usurp my brother's rightful inheritance, Jon replies steadily. Robb is Lord of Winterfell and heir to the Stark legacy. I won't be the cause of division in our family. What if there's no division? Robb asks, moving to stand beside Jon. What if I publicly support your claim? Jon stares at his brother. Why would you do that? Because the North needs what you can provide. Leadership in war, respect from the common soldiers, the ability to inspire loyalty through accomplishment rather than bloodline. Robb's voice grows stronger. I can rule Winterfell when peace returns, but right now, the North needs a war king. The phrase resonates through the hall. A war king. Someone who can unite the North through strength rather than just tradition. The Great Jon senses the moment and presses his advantage. What say you, lords? Will you follow the White Wolf as king in the North? Lord Karstark stands first. House Karstark declares for Jon Snow, king in the North. House Umber, the Great Jon bellows. House Glover stands with the White Wolf. House Manderley recognizes Jon Snow. One by one, the lords rise and declare their support, some with enthusiasm, others with careful calculation, but all recognizing the political reality that Jon has proven himself where others have not. Even the reluctant voices eventually join the chorus. Lord Hornwood, after a long pause, finally stands. House Hornwood acknowledges Jon Snow as king in the North. The hall thunders with acclaim as the last holdouts add their voices to the growing chorus. Jon stands frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what's happening. I don't have a crown, he says weakly. Lord Edmure Tully steps forward with a simple circlet of iron and silver. This belonged to the River Kings of old. It seems fitting that a new king should claim it in these halls. The crown is nothing like the elaborate golden monstrosity that sits in King's Landing. It's practical, austere, and somehow perfectly suited to a bastard who's earned his place through merit. Jon looks at Robb one final time. Are you certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything, Robb replies. The North needs you, brother. Be the king our people deserve. Jon takes a deep breath and kneels before Lord Edmure. The hall falls silent as the circlet is placed upon his head. Rise, Jon Snow, the Great Jon commands. Rise, first of your name, King in the North. King in the North, the lords shout in unison. King in the North, King in the North. The chant continues as Jon stands, the weight of the crown both lighter and heavier than he expected. Through the great windows of Riverrun, he can see the Northern Army's campfires stretching into the distance. 20,000 men who now serve a bastard king. Robb approaches and kneels before his brother an image that will be remembered in songs and stories for generations to come. "My king," he says simply. The gesture breaks the last resistance in the hall. If Robb Stark can kneel to his bastard brother, then legitimacy comes not from birth, but from acceptance. As the celebration continues around him, Jon feels the full weight of what he's become. No longer Ned Stark's bastard son, or even a competent military commander. He is now Jon Snow, first of his name, King in the North, a title that hasn't been claimed for 300 years. The Game of Thrones has gained a new player, and the North has found its voice in the growing chaos of civil war. Outside the hall, Ghost howls once, long and mournful, as if the great white wolf understands that everything has changed forever. The King in the North has risen, and the realm will never be the same. Standing in the great hall of River Run, surrounded by kneeling lords and thunderous acclaim, Jon Snow realizes that his bastard days are over. From this moment forward, he is a king, with all the glory and burden that crown entails. The White Wolf has become the Wolf King, and the North remembers who leads them home. The morning after his coronation, Jon Snow faces his first test as king. 30 Lannister knights kneel in the muddy courtyard of River Run, their hands bound behind their backs with rough rope. These are the survivors of yesterday's skirmish near the Stone Mill, men who fought bravely before being overwhelmed by superior northern numbers. Jon sits on a simple wooden chair brought from the castle, the iron crown still feeling strange upon his brow. To his right stands Robb, now serving as his brother's chief advisor. To his left, the great Jon looms like a mountain, hand resting on his sword hilt. The assembled northern lords watch expectantly. This moment will define what kind of king Jon intends to be, merciful or harsh, pragmatic or idealistic. The choice will echo through every future decision of his reign. "Bring forward the Kingslayer," Jon commands. Guards drag Jaime Lannister to the front of the group. Even bound and defeated, the golden-haired knight maintains his arrogant bearing. His green eyes study Jon with amused contempt. "So," Jaime says, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. The bastard boy has found himself a crown. How very inspiring. Several northern lords bristle at the insult, but Jon raises a hand for silence. He's heard worse than bastard taunts his entire life. "Sir Jaime," Jon says formally, "you stand accused of treason against the rightful government of the North, of making war upon King Robb's armies." "King Robb's armies?" Jaime laughs. "I see no King Robb here, only a bastard playing with his father's toys." The great Jon steps forward, his face dark with anger. "Your Grace, let me remove this dog's tongue. He's insulted your crown and your bloodline." Jon considers the suggestion. Cutting out Jaime's tongue would certainly establish his authority and satisfy the northern lord's desire for harsh justice. It would also mark him as a king who rules through fear. "No," Jon says finally. "Sir Jaime's tongue is his own concern. His actions are mine." He stands and walks closer to the bound knight, studying the man who pushed his brother from a tower and who has killed more men than Jon can count. "You served as King's Guard to Aerys Targaryen," Jon says. "Yet you killed him when duty demanded it. You served as King's Guard to Robert Baratheon, yet you made war on his appointed hand. Where does your loyalty truly lie, Sir Jaime?" Jaime's smirk never wavers. "With my family. With my gold. With whatever keeps me alive longest. Surely even a bastard can understand self-interest." "I understand it perfectly." Jon returns to his chair. "Which is why I'm curious about your current situation. You're a valuable prisoner, worth perhaps your weight in gold to the right buyer. The question is whether you're worth more dead or alive." For the first time, uncertainty flickers across Jaime's features. He's clearly expected either immediate execution or the usual noble prisoner treatment. Jon's calculating approach unsettles him. "What do you want, boy?" "I want to know if the famous Jaime Lannister has any honor left, or if the Kingslayer reputation tells the whole story. The question hangs in the morning air. Jon can sense the assembled lords' confusion at his approach. They expected swift judgment, not philosophical debate. Lord Karstark steps forward. "Your Grace, this man's crimes are well known. Justice demands consideration," Jon interrupts. "Not haste." He addresses Jaime directly. "I could execute you here and now. Your death would satisfy my lords and send a message to your father about the price of making war on the north." "But?" Jaime asks, sensing the unstated alternative. "But dead men can't learn from their mistakes. Dead men can't choose different paths." Jon leans forward. "I'm offering you a choice, Ser Jaime. Swear an oath to harm no more northern soldiers, accept exile from the Seven Kingdoms, and you may depart with your life." The courtyard erupts in surprised voices. The Great Jon's face turns purple with outrage. "Exile," he roars. "Your Grace, this man's crimes cry out for blood." "They do," Jon agrees. "But spilling that blood serves no purpose beyond satisfying our anger. Jaime Lannister in exile serves our cause better than Jaime Lannister dead." Lord Glover strokes his beard thoughtfully. "How so, Your Grace?" Jon's explanation reveals strategic thinking beyond his 14 years. A dead Jaime Lannister becomes a martyr for Lannister propaganda. An exiled Jaime Lannister becomes a living reminder that the King in the North shows mercy to defeated enemies. Which message better serves our long-term interests? Jaime studies Jon with new respect. "You're not what I expected from Ned Stark's bastard." "What did you expect? Honor without wisdom, justice without mercy, the same rigid thinking that got your father killed." Jaime pauses. "This offer, it's genuine?" "It is. But the choice must be yours, made freely in front of witnesses." Jaime considers for a long moment. Around him, 30 Lannister knights await their fate based on his decision. The weight of their lives rests on his shoulders. "If I accept exile, what of my men? Those who swear the same oath may join you. Those who prefer to remain prisoners until the war's end may do so with honor." The generous terms surprise everyone present, including Robb, who shoots his brother a questioning look. Jon responds with the slightest nod. He knows what he's doing. "And if I refuse your offer?" Jon's voice hardens. "Then you die here, now, and your men face whatever justice my lords deem appropriate." The threat carries weight because it comes without bluster or anger. Jon means every word, and Jaime recognizes the steel beneath the mercy. "Very well," Jaime says finally. "I swear by the old gods and the new that I will harm no more soldiers of the North, and I accept exile from the Seven Kingdoms for the duration of this conflict." "Witnessed and accepted," Jon declares. He turns to the other prisoners. "The same offer extends to all of you." One by one, the Lannister knights accept the terms, some with relief, others with obvious reluctance, but all recognizing the generous nature of the offer. As the prisoners are released from their bonds and prepared for departure, Lord Karstark approaches Jon privately. "Your Grace, the men are confused by this decision. They expected Lannister blood. The men will adapt. Sometimes a king must lead by example rather than follow popular opinion. And if this mercy is seen as weakness," Jon's smile carries no warmth, "then our enemies will underestimate us, which is its own advantage." Before Lord Karstark can respond, a commotion arises at the castle gates. A rider approaches under a flag of truce, his horse lathered from hard travel. "Your Grace," the messenger calls as he dismounts. "I bear urgent news from King's Landing." Jon gestures for the man to approach. "Speak freely." "King Stannis has declared all of Joffrey's supporters to be traitors and usurpers. He's called upon all true lords to support his claim to the Iron Throne." The messenger pauses for breath. "He's also sent ravens to every major house, offering pardons to those who bend the knee before the moon turns." The news sends murmurs through the assembled lords. Stannis' formal challenge to Joffrey's legitimacy changes the political landscape significantly. What of Renly? Robb asks. Lord Renly has also declared himself king, claiming that strength matters more than birth order. He's gathering support in the Reach and Stormlands. Jon absorbs this information while considering its implications for the North. With multiple southern kings competing for the throne, northern independence becomes more viable. And their attitudes toward the North's declaration? Jon asks. The messenger shifts uncomfortably. Both kings have questioned the legitimacy of a bastard-born king in the North. King Stannis calls it an abomination against proper succession. King Renly suggests the North has lost its mind. The insults draw angry growls from the northern lords, but Jon remains calm. He expected such reactions from southern royalty. Let them question, Jon says. The North's legitimacy comes from the consent of its people, not the approval of southern kings. Jaime, still present while his departure is organized, speaks up unexpectedly. The boy speaks sense. Legitimacy is what you can make others believe, not what ancient laws declare. Jon glances at the former knight. Wisdom from an unexpected source. I've served enough kings to recognize the difference between a crown and leadership. You've shown more of the latter in one morning than most manage in years of rule. The compliment from such a source carries weight with the watching lords. If Jaime Lannister acknowledges Jon's leadership qualities, perhaps the bastard king deserves their continued support. As the day progresses and the exiled Lannister knights depart under guard, Jon reflects on his first royal decision. The choice to show mercy wasn't driven by weakness or naive idealism. It was a calculated move to establish his reign's character. Do you think we'll regret this? Robb asks, as they watch the former prisoners disappear down the road. We might, Jon admits, but I'd rather regret showing too much mercy than too little. The North remembers honor, and I want them to remember their king as honorable. Even if honor gets you killed, like it did Father. Jon considers the question seriously. Father died because he trusted the wrong people with his honor. I intend to be more careful about that. As evening falls over Riverrun, Jon Snow sits in his temporary throne room, planning the next phase of his campaign. The crown still feels strange on his head, but the weight of leadership grows more familiar with each decision. His first test as king has established a precedent. The king in the North rules with strength tempered by mercy, justice balanced by wisdom. Whether this approach will serve him well in the darker trials ahead remains to be seen. But for now, Jon Snow has proven himself worthy of the crown the lords placed upon his head. The bastard who once dreamed of the Night's Watch has become a king who dreams of something greater, a North that stands free and proud, led by honor, rather than driven by fear. The Game of Thrones has gained a new player, one whose moves surprise even experienced practitioners like Jaime Lannister. And in the capital, other kings are beginning to take notice of the White Wolf, who rules from Winterfell. The scouts bring word at dawn. 40,000 men march beneath Lannister banners. Jon stands atop the ridge overlooking the Tumblestone River, watching the crimson tide flow across the horizon. Even at this distance, the disciplined columns and gleaming armor mark these as professional soldiers, not hastily raised levies. Tywin Lannister himself leads them, reports Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, who has joined the Northern cause. I recognize his golden standard from 30 years of warfare. The great Jon spits into the grass. 40,000 against our 20. The old lion thinks to overwhelm us with numbers. Numbers aren't everything, Jon says, though privately he wonders if they're enough this time. We have the high ground and the river to our backs. Tywin will have to come to us. Lord Karstark points to the approaching army. That's no rushed advance. Look how they deploy. Infantry center, cavalry wings, reserves held back. The man knows his business. Jon studies the enemy formation through the spyglass borrowed from the Blackfish. Tywin's reputation as the most dangerous general in Westeros wasn't built on luck or brutal tactics alone. The Lannister host moves with precision that speaks of long experience and iron discipline. "He's giving us time to see our doom approaching," Robb observes, joining the command group. "Tywin wants us to fear those numbers before the fighting even starts." "Then we'll give him a battle he doesn't expect," Jon decides. "Send word to the captains. We implement the river stratagem." The plan Jon has devised is audacious even by northern standards. Instead of meeting Tywin's superior numbers in direct battle, the northern forces will use the Tumblestone's current to their advantage. Half the army will cross under cover of darkness, positioning themselves to attack the Lannister rear, while the main force holds the ridge. "It's risky," the Great Jon warns. "If the river force gets caught before we can support them, then we lose half our army instead of all of it," Jon finishes. "Those are better odds than fighting Tywin straight up." As night falls, 10,000 Northmen cross the river in small boats and makeshift rafts. Jon watches from the ridge as dark shapes disappear into the forest beyond, carrying his hopes and the lives of half his kingdom. The attack begins before sunrise. Lannister horns sound across the valley as northern arrows rain down from unexpected directions. Tywin's carefully ordered camps erupt into chaos as soldiers struggle to respond to attacks from multiple angles. But the old lion doesn't panic. Even as his rear guard fights desperately against the northern river force, Tywin maintains his main attack up the ridge. Whatever surprise Jon achieved, it won't win the battle alone. The clash of steel echoes across the riverlands as 40,000 Lannister soldiers assault the northern positions. Jon fights in the center of the line, his sword cutting down anyone foolish enough to challenge the king in the north directly. Ghost tears through enemy ranks beside him, the great white wolf's presence spreading terror among Lannister soldiers who've never faced a dire wolf in battle. Men flee rather than stand against the legendary beast, creating gaps in their formation. "The center holds," the Great Jon roars, his massive sword cleaving through a cluster of Lannister knights. But the left flank wavers. Jon turns to see northern soldiers giving ground under intense pressure. A wedge of Lannister heavy cavalry has broken through the line, threatening to roll up the entire position. "Take the reserves," Jon shouts to Robb. "Shore up that flank before it collapses." But even as Robb leads fresh troops toward the crisis, Jon realizes the truth. They're being outfought. Tywin's superior numbers and veteran troops are slowly but inevitably grinding down the northern resistance. A Lannister knight on horseback charges directly at Jon, lance aimed at his heart. Jon sidesteps and brings his sword up in a rising cut that takes the rider from the saddle. But 3 more knights appear to take his place. The battle becomes a blur of steel and blood. Jon fights with desperate intensity, knowing that if the northern center breaks, the entire army will dissolve into rout. Around him, men die for the crown he wears and the kingdom he's claimed. A mace blow to his helmet sends Jon staggering. His vision blurs as a Lannister sergeant presses the attack, sword stabbing toward Jon's exposed neck. The blade never arrives. The Great Jon's massive form crashes into the sergeant like an avalanche, crushing the man beneath his weight. "Stay close to me, your grace!" the giant lord bellows. "The king dies, we all die!" But staying close becomes impossible as the melee intensifies. Jon finds himself separated from his guards, surrounded by enemy soldiers who recognize the northern crown and seek the glory of killing a king. A Lannister knight's blade slips past Jon's guard, opening a gash along his ribs. Another cuts his sword arm, nearly making him drop his weapon. Pain and exhaustion weigh him down as the circle of enemies tightens. "This is how I die," Jon thinks with strange clarity. Not as a bastard seeking purpose, but as a king defending his people. Then Lord Karstark appears with a dozen Karstark men-at-arms, their swords cutting through the Lannister circle like a scythe through wheat. "The king needs extraction," Karstark shouts. They fight their way back to the northern lines. But Jon can see the battle is lost. The river force has achieved its objectives, but taken heavy casualties doing so. The main northern army holds its positions, but can't maintain them much longer against superior numbers. "We need to withdraw," Jon admits, the words tasting like defeat. "Withdraw to where?" the Great Jon asks. "Tywin will pursue us all the way to Winterfell. Then we make him pay for every mile," Jon decides. "Fighting withdrawal. Make them bleed for every yard they gain." The retreat begins at midday, covered by northern archers and the remnants of the cavalry. Jon watches his kingdom's soldiers fall back in good order, despite their losses, maintaining discipline even in defeat. But the cost becomes clear as the casualty reports arrive. 7,000 northern soldiers lie dead or wounded on the field. The river force lost nearly half its strength in the desperate fighting beyond the Tumblestone. "Your Grace," Maester Coleman approaches with a scroll, "the final count from the battle." Jon reads the numbers with growing horror. Not just the dead, those he expected, but the specific names. Sir Roderick Castle, his father's master-at-arms, killed defending the northern standard. Young Darren Hornwood, barely 16, cut down in his first real battle. Dozens of others Jon knew personally, men who'd followed him from Winterfell and died for his crown. "This is what kingship costs," Robb says quietly, reading over Jon's shoulder. "Every decision has a price in blood." Jon stares at the list of the fallen, feeling their weight settle on his shoulders like chains. These men died because he'd chosen to fight Tywin instead of withdrawing earlier. Their deaths are his responsibility, part of the burden he accepted when he took the crown. The retreat continues, Jon orders, his voice hollow but determined. "We fall back to River Run and regroup. This battle is lost, but the war continues." As the northern army withdraws deeper into the Riverlands, Jon rides at the rear guard, watching for signs of Lannister pursuit. The crown on his head feels heavier than ever, weighted down with the blood of good men who died following his orders. Behind them, smoke rises from the battlefield where so many Northmen fell. Ahead lies an uncertain future, with Tywin Lannister's army between them and home. The bastard king has learned his hardest lesson yet, that wearing a crown means carrying the weight of every soul lost in its service. Victory brings glory, but defeat brings guilt that no amount of strategic wisdom can ease. Ghost pads alongside Jon's horse, the direwolf's white fur stained with enemy blood. The sight should be encouraging. Their side drew blood too, made Tywin pay for his victory. But Jon finds no comfort in the exchange rate of death. 7,000 loyal Northmen bought them time to escape encirclement and live to fight another day. Whether that price was worth paying remains to be seen. But as Jon looks back at his battered but unbroken army, he knows one thing with certainty. The boy who once dreamed of joining the Night's Watch is gone forever, consumed by the fires of kingship and the weight of command. In his place rides a young king who's learned that the crown's greatest burden isn't its weight on his head, but the weight of all the souls who die in its service. The Game of Thrones has claimed more pieces, and Jon Snow carries their names with him as he retreats into the gathering dusk. The war is far from over, but the bastard king now understands its true cost. Every crown is bought with blood, and every king must decide if the price is worth paying. For Jon Snow, first of his name, king in the north, that reckoning has only just begun. Yet still his army follows, still the direwolf banners fly, and still the north remembers who leads them through the darkness. Even in defeat, the White Wolf remains unbroken, and that, perhaps, is victory enough for now. The ravens arrive like harbingers of a new age. Jon sits in his temporary quarters at River Run, still recovering from the wounds taken in battle against Tywin's forces. 3 weeks have passed since the defeat, 3 weeks of tending the wounded and rebuilding shattered companies. The northern army remains intact, but blooded, its confidence shaken by their first major reverse. Maester Coleman enters, carrying a leather satchel filled with scrolls, his weathered face troubled. "Your Grace, urgent correspondence from across the narrow sea." "What news?" Jon asks, setting aside his breakfast untouched. His appetite has been poor since the battle, weighed down by guilt over the 7,000 dead. Coleman unrolls the first parchment. From Pentus, a young woman claiming to be Daenerys Targaryen has hatched 3 dragon eggs. The beasts are said to be the size of cats, but growing rapidly. The words hang in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Dragons, extinct for over a century, now reborn in the hands of a Targaryen claimant. Dragons, Jon repeats slowly. Are we certain these reports are reliable? Coleman produces additional scrolls. Confirmations from Tyrosh, Lys, and Volantis. The details vary, but the essential facts remain consistent. 3 living dragons serve a silver-haired girl who calls herself the rightful queen of the 7 kingdoms. Jon stares at the messages, his mind racing through implications. A Targaryen with dragons changes everything. The balance of power, the legitimacy of claims, the very nature of the war they're fighting. Send word to my advisors, Jon commands. We need a council of war immediately. Within the hour, the great hall fills with northern lords and their most trusted captains. The Great Jon sits heavily in his chair, still favouring his left arm from a sword cut taken in the recent battle. Lord Karstark bears fresh scars across his cheek, while Robb moves carefully, due to cracked ribs from a mace blow. My lords, Jon begins, we face a new player in the Game of Thrones. Daenerys Targaryen lives, and she commands dragons. The hall erupts in surprised voices. Several lords make religious signs, while others mutter prayers to the old gods. Dragons, the Great Jon growls. Aegon's dragons conquered the 7 kingdoms 300 years ago. If this girl has their like, she could do the same. If the reports are true, Lord Glover says carefully. Dragons have been extinct for generations. This could be southern propaganda designed to weaken our resolve. Multiple independent sources, Jon replies. Merchants, sailors, even Dothraki horsemen tell the same tale. The dragons are real. Lord Karstark leans forward. Then we need to consider our options. A Targaryen restoration changes the entire political landscape. How so? Asks Robb. Jon spreads a map of Westeros across the table. Think strategically. Joffrey sits on the Iron Throne with questionable legitimacy. Stannis and Renly both claim the crown but lack the strength to take it. Now a Targaryen appears with the ultimate symbol of royal power. The common people still remember the Mad King, the Great Jon points out. They might not welcome another Targaryen. They might not welcome continued civil war either, counters Lord Glover. Dragons could end this conflict quickly and restore peace. The debate continues as lords weigh the implications of this new development. Jon listens carefully, noting how each man's loyalties and fears shape his opinions. What of our independence? Asks Lord Hornwood. We've declared ourselves free of southern rule. Would a Targaryen queen accept northern autonomy? Unlikely, Jon admits. Dragons don't negotiate, they conquer. Maester Coleman speaks up from his position near the hearth. There are other considerations, Your Grace. Historical precedents suggest that dragon lords view themselves as divinely appointed rulers. Compromise isn't in their nature. Then we prepare for the possibility of conflict, Jon decides. But we also consider other options. Perhaps this Daenerys Targaryen could be reasoned with, convinced that the North poses no threat to her rule. Before anyone can respond, a commotion arises outside the hall. Guards' voices echo in the corridor, followed by unfamiliar accents speaking formal courtesies. Visitors, Your Grace, announces Sir Brynden Tully, entering the hall. They claim urgent business with the king in the north. Jon exchanges glances with his advisors. Show them in. 3 figures enter the hall, their travel-stained cloaks marking them as men who've ridden hard and far. The leader pushes back his hood to reveal a weathered face marked by the green eyes and muddy brown hair of House Reed. Lord Howland Reed, Jon says with surprise. What brings the Lord of Greywater Watch so far from the neck? Howland Reed steps forward and performs a formal bow, but his eyes never leave Jon's face. Your Grace, I bring word that will shake the very foundations of your kingdom." The formal tone sends ice through Jon's veins. Howland Reed was his father's closest friend and most trusted ally. For him to speak so formally suggests matters of gravest importance. "Speak freely, my lord." Howland glances around the assembled lords. Perhaps this conversation would be better held in private. "These men have sworn their lives to my cause," Jon replies. "Speak your mind." Howland hesitates, then reaches into his travel pack and produces a leather portfolio sealed with multiple ribbons. "What I carry changes everything we know about bloodlines, legitimacy, and the rightful succession to the Iron Throne." Jon's hands tremble slightly as he accepts the portfolio. Something in Howland's manner suggests this isn't just political intelligence, it's personal. "Before you open that," Howland says quietly, "understand that knowledge carries a price. Once you know what's written there, you can never unknow it. Your life, your kingdom, your very identity will never be the same." The warning sends murmurs through the assembled lords. Jon looks around the hall, seeing curiosity and concern in equal measure. "Lord Reed," Jon says carefully, "you speak in riddles. What knowledge could be so dangerous?" "The knowledge of who you truly are." The simple statement hits Jon like a physical blow. His parentage has always been a source of pain and uncertainty. The bastard son of Honorable Ned Stark, born of some unknown woman during Robert's rebellion. "I know who I am," Jon says, though his voice lacks conviction. "Do you?" Howland's eyes bore into Jon's. "Do you know why your father never spoke of your mother? Why he refused all questions about her identity, even from his closest friends?" Jon's mouth goes dry. These are questions that have haunted him his entire life, wounds that never fully healed, despite his acceptance of bastard status. "Tell me," he whispers. Howland takes a deep breath. "Open the portfolio, Your Grace. But remember, some truths are more dangerous than any lie." Jon breaks the seals with shaking fingers and opens the leather folder. Inside, he finds documents in his father's careful handwriting, along with items he's never seen before. A blue rose pressed between sheets of parchment, a silver ring bearing the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. The first document bears a date from the final year of Robert's rebellion. "By my hand and seal, I, Eddard of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, do swear by the old gods and the new, that the child I bring home is not born of my blood, but of my sister's. Lyanna Stark died giving birth to the son of Rhaegar Targaryen in the Tower of Joy. I claim this child as my bastard, to protect him from Robert's wrath and preserve his life. May the gods forgive me this necessary lie. Witnessed by Howland Reed." The parchment slips from Jon's nerveless fingers. The hall spins around him as the implications crash down like an avalanche. "You're not Ned Stark's bastard," Howland says gently. "You're the true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Your real name is Aegon Targaryen, and by rights of birth, you are the rightful heir to the Iron Throne." Silence fills the great hall like a tomb. Jon stares at the documents scattered before him, each one confirming the impossible truth. He's not a bastard at all. He's a prince, born of the union between a Targaryen crown prince and the wolf maid of Winterfell. This can't be real," Jon stammers. "Your father, Ned Stark, was the most honorable man I ever knew," Howland continues. "He raised you as his bastard to protect you from Robert Baratheon's hatred of all things Targaryen. Ned died keeping this secret, choosing disgrace over your safety." The great Jon's voice cuts through the stunned silence. If this is true, if Jon is truly Rhaegar's son, then he has a better claim to the Iron Throne than anyone currently fighting for it, Lord Karstark finishes. Better than Joffrey, better than Stannis or Renly, better even than this Daenerys Targaryen. Jon's world tilts on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about himself crumbles and reforms. Not Ned Stark's bastard, but Lyanna Stark's son. Not Jon Snow, but Aegon Targaryen. Not a pretender king, but the rightful heir to 3 centuries of Targaryen rule. The Dragon Queen you were just discussing, Howland says quietly, is your aunt. And if these reports of her dragons are true, you two are the last known Targaryens in the world. Jon looks up from the scattered documents, his violet eyes, always thought to be a quirk of northern bloodlines, now carrying new significance. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? He asks. That, your grace, is entirely up to you, Howland replies. You can remain Jon Snow, the bastard who became king in the north, or you can reclaim your birthright as Aegon Targaryen, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The hall remains silent as lords and advisors process the magnitude of this revelation. Outside, the northern army goes about its daily business, unaware that their bastard king has just discovered he's the most legitimate claimant to the throne they're fighting against. Jon stares at his hands, looking for some sign of the dragon blood that supposedly flows through his veins. All he sees are the calloused fingers of a swordsman and the scars of recent battle. I need time to think, Jon says finally. Time is a luxury we may not have, Howland warns. If word of this spreads, every faction in Westeros will either try to kill you or use you for their own purposes. Jon nods, understanding the danger. Knowledge of his true parentage makes him simultaneously the most powerful and most vulnerable person in the 7 kingdoms. As the council disperses and lords file out in stunned silence, Jon remains alone with Howland Reed and the documents that have shattered his understanding of himself. Why now? Jon asks. Why reveal this after so many years? Howland's expression grows grave. Because dragons have returned to the world, your grace, and when dragons dance, the realm bleeds. You may be the only person alive who can prevent another Targaryen civil war. Jon looks through the great windows at his army's banners, fluttering in the evening breeze. The dire wolf of Stark flies beside dozens of northern houses, all following a bastard they believed in. Now that bastard has learned he's a dragon. The question is whether Westeros is ready for another dragon lord, or whether the dragons will burn it all to ash in their struggle for dominance. In the growing darkness, Jon Snow contemplates the crown on his head and wonders if it's the right one he should be wearing. The Game of Thrones has just gained its most dangerous piece, and the player doesn't even know if he wants to be in the game at all. The blade comes for Jon in the hour before dawn. He wakes to Ghost's low growl, the dire wolf's white form tense beside his bed. Years of survival instincts, inherited from both Stark and Targaryen bloodlines, scream danger as Jon rolls sideways, just as steel whistles through the space where his head had been. Lord Rickard Karstark stands over the bed, his weathered face twisted with rage and betrayal. In his hand gleams a curved dagger, still wet with the blood of Jon's guards. "Dragon spawn!" Karstark snarls, raising the blade for another strike. "I'll not serve the Mad King's grandson." Jon scrambles backward, reaching for Longclaw where it rests beside his bed. But Karstark is faster, his desperation lending speed to movements that should be slowed by age. The dagger descends again, this time aimed at Jon's heart. Ghost's massive form crashes into Karstark before the blow can land. The direwolf's jaws clamp down on the Lord's sword arm, bone crunching audibly as the dagger falls from nerveless fingers. Karstark screams in pain and terror as Ghost shakes him like a child's toy. "Get this beast off me!" "Ghost, enough!" Jon commands, though his voice shakes with adrenaline and betrayal. The direwolf releases Karstark, but remains poised to attack, blood dripping from ivory fangs. The Northern Lord collapses to his knees, cradling his mangled arm. Guards rush into the tent, having finally overcome whatever obstacles Karstark placed in their way. The Great Yon leads them, his massive sword already drawn. "Your Grace, are you injured?" "I'm unharmed." Jon stands slowly, pulling on his clothes while keeping his eyes fixed on Karstark. Secure, Lord Karstark. Carefully. He's still a lord of the North. The great Jon's face darkens as he surveys the scene. A lord who just tried to murder his king. The penalty for that is clear. More northern lords arrive as word spreads through the camp. Lord Glover appears at the tent entrance, his face pale with shock. Behind him come Robb, Maester Coleman, and others awakened by the commotion. "What happened here?" Robb demands, taking in the blood-stained tent and Karstark's injuries. "Treason," the great Jon replies bluntly. "Lord Karstark tried to murder the king in his sleep." Gasps echo through the assembled lords. Karstark looks up from where he kneels, his eyes burning with unrepentant fury. "Treason!" he spits. "I call it justice. You all heard what that Reed bastard revealed. This boy isn't Ned Stark's son. He's Rhaegar Targaryen's whelp. Dragon blood flows in his veins." "Dragon blood that makes him the rightful heir to the Iron Throne," Lord Glover says carefully. "Dragon blood that makes him a kinslayer's spawn," Karstark retorts. "Rhaegar Targaryen stole Lyanna Stark and started the war that killed her. Now you'd have us follow his son? Have you all forgotten what dragons cost the realm?" The accusation hangs heavy in the morning air. Jon sees doubt flickering in some faces, uncertainty in others. The revelation of his parentage has shaken loyalties he thought were secure. "I am still the same person you crowned king in the North," Jon says quietly. "My blood doesn't change who I've proven myself to be." "Doesn't it?" Karstark struggles to his feet, favoring his injured arm. "How long before the dragon nature shows itself? How long before you decide northern independence isn't enough, that you want the whole realm to burn?" "I've given you no cause to think that," Jon replies. "You've given me cause to remember history. Aerys burned men alive for sport. Rhaegar kidnapped and raped your mother. What makes you different from them?" The words cut deep because they echo fears Jon has harbored since learning the truth. Does Targaryen madness flow in his blood alongside the capacity for leadership? "What I do next," Jon says slowly, "will show you the difference." He turns to address the assembled lords. Lord Karstark stands accused of attempting regicide. The penalty under northern law is death. "Good," the great Jon growls. "I'll take his head myself." "You will not," Jon's voice carries new authority. "Lord Karstark will face judgment, but not summary execution." Robb steps forward, his face hard. "Brother, this man tried to murder you while you slept. Justice demands his death." "Justice demands consideration of all factors," Jon counters. "Lord Karstark has served House Stark faithfully for decades. His sons died fighting for our cause. His anger comes from loyalty to the past, not malice toward the future." "His anger comes from treason," Lord Glover states flatly. "Your Grace, showing mercy to assassins invites more attempts." Jon looks around the circle of lords, seeing the expectation of harsh justice in most faces. They want blood to answer blood, death to answer betrayal. "Assemble a formal war council," Jon commands. "Lord Karstark will face judgment according to law and precedent, not emotion." 2 hours later, the Great Hall of Riverrun hosts a grim assembly. Lord Karstark sits in chains before the high table, his injured arm bound, but his defiance unbroken. The northern lords fill the hall, their faces grave as they prepare to witness royal justice. Jon sits on the simple throne they've constructed, the crown heavy on his brow. To his right stands Robb, visibly struggling with the conflict between family loyalty and legal duty. "Lord Rickard Karstark," Jon begins formally. "You stand accused of attempting to murder your lawful king. How do you answer this charge?" Karstark raises his head defiantly. "I answer that I struck at an usurper wearing a stolen crown. Rhaegar Targaryen's bastard has no right to rule the North." "I am not Rhaegar's bastard," Jon says calmly. "I am his true-born son, born of lawful marriage to Lyanna Stark. The documents Lord Reed provided prove this beyond doubt." "Documents can be forged. Blood cannot be denied." Karstark's voice carries across the hall. "You have dragon blood, boy. That makes you our enemy, not our king." The Great Jon rises from his seat, face purple with rage. "Your Grace, this dog insults your crown and your bloodline. Let me remove his head and be done with it." "Sit down," Jon commands. The Great Jon reluctantly complies, though his hand remains on his sword hilt. Robb steps forward. "Your Grace, the law is clear. Attempted regicide carries only one penalty. Lord Karstark must die." "Must he?" Jon asks. "Or do we have choices in how we dispense justice?" Maester Coleman speaks from his position beside the throne. "Your Grace, precedent strongly supports execution. King's justice has always been harsh for good reason. And what reason is that? To deter others from similar acts. Mercy to traitors encourages more treason." Jon stands and walks closer to where Karstark sits. The injured lord meets his gaze without flinching. "Lord Karstark," Jon says quietly, "you saved my life in the battle against Tywin Lannister. When Lannister knights surrounded me, you cut through their ranks to reach me. Why?" Karstark's certainty wavers slightly. "Because you were my king then." "And what changed between then and now?" "I learned what you really are." Jon nods slowly. "You learned I carry Targaryen blood alongside Stark blood. But did you learn I had become cruel, mad, power-hungry?" "Blood tells," Karstark insists, though with less conviction. "Does it? Then tell me, what does my mother's blood say?" "Lyanna Stark was known for her honor, her fierce protection of those she loved, her unwillingness to accept injustice." Jon's voice grows stronger. "If blood determines character, shouldn't her influence matter as much as my father's?" The question clearly troubles Karstark. Around the hall, lords murmur as they consider this argument. Jon returns to his throne. "Lord Karstark, you tried to kill me because you feared I would become something terrible. Your fear was born of loyalty to the North and love of its people." "It was," Karstark admits. "Then I will not kill you for loving the North too much." Jon's words send shocked murmurs through the assembly. "But neither can I ignore attempted regicide." The Great Jon explodes from his seat. "Your Grace, this is madness. You cannot show mercy to would-be assassins." "I can show justice, tempered by understanding," Jon replies firmly. "Lord Karstark, I hereby strip you of your lands and titles. You are exiled from the North for the remainder of your natural life." Gasps echo through the hall. The sentence is harsh but not fatal. Punishment without execution. Furthermore, Jon continues, House Karstark's lands and titles pass to your eldest surviving son, to be held in trust until this war ends. Your family bears no guilt for your actions. Karstark stares at Jon in shock. You're sparing my life?" "I'm giving you the chance to prove that mercy can inspire loyalty better than fear," Jon replies. "Live with honor in exile, and perhaps history will remember you as a man who loved his homeland too much, not as a traitor who hated his king." The hall falls silent as lords process this unprecedented judgment. Robb approaches the throne, his expression troubled. "Brother," he says quietly, "the lords expected blood. This mercy may be seen as weakness." Jon stands and addresses the assembly. "Let me be clear to all present. I show mercy today because Lord Karstark's actions came from misguided loyalty, not evil intent. But any future attempts on my life will meet with steel, not understanding." His voice hardens. "I am Jon Snow, first of my name, a king in the North. I am also Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Both bloodlines flow in my veins, and I will honor both. But I rule by choice and consent, not by fear and fire." The declaration sends murmurs through the hall. Jon has acknowledged his dual heritage while reaffirming his commitment to Northern values. Lord Glover stands. "Your Grace, what of the war? Tywin Lannister still threatens the Riverlands, and now we face the possibility of dragons from across the narrow sea. Preparations begin immediately for our next campaign, Jon announces. We've learned from our defeat and grown stronger for it. The North remembers, and we will have our justice. As the assembly disperses and Karstark is prepared for exile, Robb approaches Jon privately. That was either the wisest decision you've ever made, or the most dangerous, Robb observes. Jon looks out the great windows at his army's banners. Perhaps both. But I'd rather be remembered as a king who showed too much mercy than one who showed too little. Even if mercy gets you killed? Especially then. Jon's hand rests on Longclaw's hilt. A king who rules only through fear isn't really a king at all. He's just a tyrant with a crown. As night falls over River Run, Jon reflects on the hardest lesson of kingship yet learned. Power without mercy becomes tyranny, but mercy without strength invites chaos. The balance between them defines not just a ruler's effectiveness, but his soul. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new tests of his judgment and resolve. But tonight, Jon Snow has proven that dragon blood need not burn everything it touches. Sometimes it can choose to heal instead. Spring arrives early in the Riverlands, bringing with it ravens that carry the scent of change. Jon stands on the battlements of River Run, watching his army break camp for the final march home. 6 months have passed since his coronation. 6 months of battles won and lost, alliances forged and broken, truths revealed, and prices paid. The northern host that prepares to depart bears little resemblance to the force that rode south in winter. These men have been tempered by fire and steel, transformed from farmers and huntsmen into veteran soldiers who've proven themselves against the finest warriors in Westeros. "The last of the supply wagons are ready, Your Grace," reports Sir Brynden Tully, approaching with a scroll of parchments. The Blackfish has proved invaluable in these final negotiations. Jon accepts the documents that formalize the peace treaty with what remains of the Lannister forces. After 3 decisive victories following his defeat by Tywin, including the crushing victory at Seaguard, where Ghost tore through enemy ranks like an avenging spirit, even the proud lions of Casterly Rock have accepted northern independence. Tywin Lannister agrees to withdraw all forces north of the Trident, Jon reads aloud. The North is recognized as a sovereign kingdom under the rule of House Snow. All prisoners taken in battle are to be exchanged without ransom. A generous settlement, the great Jon observes, joining them on the battlements, considering we could have demanded much more after Seaguard. Jon nods, though his satisfaction is tempered by the cost of these victories. 15,000 Northmen lie buried in southern soil, their lives the price of the crown he wears. Every decision, every battle, every political maneuver has been paid for in blood. "Generosity serves our long-term interests better than harshness," Jon replies. "The North needs peace to rebuild, and vengeful enemies make poor neighbors." A commotion in the courtyard below draws their attention. A party of horsemen approaches under the direwolf banner of Stark, their leader familiar despite months of separation. "Is that—" the great Jon begins. "Arya," Jon breathes, recognizing his sister, despite the changes 6 months of war have wrought. He races down from the battlements, taking the stone steps 3 at a time. In the courtyard, Arya slides from her horse with practiced ease, her clothes travel-stained, but her grey eyes bright with fierce joy. "Sister," Jon calls, and she turns toward his voice. For a moment, they simply stare at each other across the space of the courtyard. Jon sees in Arya's face the same mixture of grief and resilience he feels in his own heart. The children who played in Winterfell's Godswood are gone, replaced by survivors who've learned the true cost of honor. Then Arya breaks into a run, and Jon catches her in an embrace that speaks of all the fear and longing the past months have contained. "I heard you were dead," she whispers against his shoulder. "After Father, I thought they'd killed you too." I'm harder to kill than they expected, Jon replies, holding her tight. How did you escape King's Landing? Arya's story unfolds over the following hours, a tale of survival, unlikely allies, and the small kindnesses that preserved her life when power and politics failed. She speaks of Sario Forel and Yoren, of Jaqen H'ghar and the Faceless Men, of a journey through the Riverlands that taught her lessons no highborn girl should need to learn. You've grown, Jon observes as they walk together through Riverrun's halls. So have you. Arya studies the crown on his head with undisguised curiosity. King in the North, father would be proud. Would he? I've made choices he never would have made, shown mercy to enemies, allied with former foes, built my rule on pragmatism rather than pure honor. Arya considers this. Maybe that's why you succeeded where he failed. Honor without wisdom is just another way of dying young. That evening, Jon convenes his final war council in the Great Hall. The northern lords gather around the familiar table, their faces bearing the scars and weathering of a long campaign. The immediate war is won, Jon announces. The North's independence is secured, our enemies have withdrawn, and our people can return to their homes in peace. What of the other kingdoms? Lord Glover asks. The War of 5 Kings continues without us. Let them fight, the great Jon rumbles. The North has no concern with southern squabbles now. Jon spreads a map of Westeros across the table. Our immediate concerns are rebuilding and strengthening what we've gained. New laws must be established for our kingdom, trade agreements negotiated, defenses prepared for future threats. What sort of new laws? Inquires Robb, who has served faithfully as Jon's chief advisor throughout the campaign. Jon has given this considerable thought during the long nights of war. Laws that reflect northern values, but acknowledge the realities of independent rule. Merit-based advancement for soldiers and administrators, protection for small folk against the excesses of lords, fair taxation that builds roads and granaries rather than gilded palaces. The assembled lords murmur approval. These are practical measures that will strengthen the kingdom rather than merely enrich its rulers. And the succession? Lord Karstark's son asks carefully. The young man has proven worthy of his inherited title, leading his father's men with honor since the elder Karstark's exile. Jon's hand moves unconsciously to the documents that prove his Targaryen heritage. The succession remains with House Snow until such time as I father legitimate heirs. Should I die without children, the crown passes to the next most suitable member of House Stark. That would be Lord Robb, Lord Glover observes. It would, Jon agrees, though I hope such considerations remain distant concerns. As the council concludes, and lords disperse to make their final preparations for departure, Jon finds himself alone with Robb in the Great Hall. Regrets? Robb asks, noting his brother's contemplative mood. Jon considers the question seriously. Regrets about the dead? Yes. Regrets about the choices that led to their deaths, sometimes. But regrets about taking the crown? No. Even knowing what you know about your other heritage. Jon's smile holds no warmth, especially knowing that. If I am truly Aegon Targaryen, then I've proven that dragon blood need not burn everything it touches. I've shown that power can be used to build rather than destroy. And if this Daenerys Targaryen arrives with her dragons, then we'll see whether the realm is large enough for 2 dragons who rule by different philosophies. The next morning brings departure from Riverrun and the long march home to Winterfell. Jon rides at the head of his army, the direwolf banners of a dozen noble houses snapping in the wind behind him. The journey north takes them through lands that bear the scars of war, but also show signs of recovery. Fields are being replanted, villages rebuilt, the normal rhythms of life resuming now that armies no longer trample the countryside. At White Harbour, Lord Manderley's representative greets them with news from home. Winterfell has been restored to full function. The harvest has been good, and the common folk speak of their bastard king with mixture of pride and affection. They call you the Wolf King still, the representative reports, but also the Just King and the King who came home. Jon finds satisfaction in these titles. Better to be remembered for justice and faithfulness than for conquest and cruelty. Winterfell appears on the horizon, like a dream made manifest, its grey walls and familiar towers unchanged despite all that has happened. Jon feels a tightness in his chest as they pass through the gates, not the bastard who left seeking purpose, but a king returning to his seat of power. The great hall fills with celebration as the northern lords and their men are welcomed home. Toasts are raised to victory, to peace, to the independence they've won through blood and sacrifice. But later, when the celebration has died down and the castle settles into quieter rhythms, Jon finds himself drawn to familiar places. The Godswood where he played as a child, the practice yard where he learned swordplay, the chambers where he grew from boy to man. Standing beneath the heart tree with its carved face and red leaves, Jon reflects on the journey that has brought him to this moment. From bastard to commander to king, from Jon Snow to Aegon Targaryen to something new, a ruler who honors both bloodlines while being defined by neither. Ghost appears beside him, the great white wolf moving silently through the Godswood. Jon rests his hand on the dire wolf's head, drawing comfort from the familiar presence. "We've come far from that day. I decided not to take the black," Jon murmurs. A sound from the north draws his attention, distant and faint, but unmistakable to ears trained by years of frontier living. Horns, blown in the specific pattern that means urgent warning. Jon's blood runs cold as he recognizes the call. 3 long blasts, repeated twice. The signal from the wall. The signal that means something moves in the far north, something that threatens more than any kingdom's borders or any king's ambitions. The dead are stirring beyond the wall, and winter is coming for all the realm. Jon Snow, first of his name, king in the north and unknowing heir to the Targaryen legacy, stands in his Godswood and contemplates the greatest challenge yet to come. The Game of Thrones may be won, but a darker game approaches, one where crowns and titles matter less than steel and courage. The White Walkers are returning, and when they come, all the kingdoms of men must stand together or fall separately. But for now, Jon allows himself this moment of peace, this brief respite between the wars behind and the war to come. He has proven himself worthy of the crown he wears, worthy of the trust placed in him by those who chose to follow a bastard king. The North remembers, and the North endures. And in the growing darkness beyond the wall, ancient evils stir, preparing for a confrontation that will determine the fate of all living things. The bastard who became a king has won his first war. His greatest test lies ahead in the long night to come. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. What if